Morning, good evening, and welcome to the ARES Strategic Mining Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company can review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and if you would give that your kind consideration, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I'd now like to hand over the team from ARES Strategic Mining. Carl, good afternoon, good evening.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. Very excited to have you here today as we give James a bit of time, CEO of ARES Strategic Mining, to talk about the project that's currently underway at the Lost Sheep Mine in Utah. So without any further ado, James, please start the presentation. Why tell us all about ARES?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Carl. I hope everybody can see the slides. Obviously, we're ARES Strategic Mining. I'm James Walker. I'm the CEO of ARES. And I'd like to just walk you through a little bit about how we got going. And just before I do that, it's because this is a presentation for new investors. It's probably good to understand what fluorspar actually is, because to be honest, most people don't know what it is, even though it forms a major component of a lot of the things we use on a day-to-day basis. So it's an industrial mineral, but it's also a critical mineral, which means it's considered vital to the economic security of the United States. And it's used in the manufacture of steel. It's used in the manufacture of aluminum, hydrofluoric acid, fluorine, lithium-ion batteries, electronics, cement, glass industries. It's one of the most widely used and ubiquitous industrial minerals in the world for industrial applications, just because of the unique properties that it actually has. It's also kind of unique because of all of the critical industrial minerals, it's the only one that's 100% imported, non-metallic, 100% imported into the country. So the US has been reliant on foreign imports of this for a long time. And as a bit of background history, it used to have a very thriving and big fluorspar industry. But when China was industrializing, the US industry was shipped overseas because China was able to flood the market with cheap product, and that killed the US domestic industry. And so there is an opportunity here to actually bring that industry back to the country. And I'll get into why that brought in some US support, US government support as we progressed. So the mine itself, when we didn't actually start with the intention of going into fluorspar. What actually happened was that we were looking for projects for an empty vehicle that were low capital costs, that were already in production or permitted, and would not require that sort of $100 million plants that you would see for smelters, gold, silver, or rare earth minerals, anything like that. And how this happened was that while we were looking at that, I was working with a geologist who had worked at Europe's largest fluorspar mine. That's based in Spain. And he brought this up to me that there was a mine operating in Utah. It was just two old gentlemen, and they were mining it artisanally, which means that they were just putting a shovel in the ground and putting that shovel into a bag and selling the bag. It's very unusual in mining without any processing, and that inherently means that the grade is an excellent grade, very high towards or at production level quality already. So we went down and have a look at what they were doing, and they were just artisanally mining it, just two old guys. And we also realized that the entire mountain range had been previously occupied by other claim holders, but because they were older, they had mostly died and the claims had lapsed, and so the entire district was open. So the first thing we did was we staked that entire district, so several thousand acres of land where there were fluorspar showings at surface. And you could see it. You could see purple just bursting to surface where we went across this big mountain range. And then finally, we went and actually bought the mine itself. We bought that finally, and that was the area because it was already permitted. Everything was grandfathered in that would allow us to start development straight away. So what is the life? And so what is the lifespan of the mine? Oh, these are submitted questions. Sorry. So a little bit more about how we developed from here is that once we actually acquired the mine, it was fairly easy to go to market and get some good support for actually bringing in money into the company. And we did this back in 2020. Once we'd done this, we went out and we proceeded in a very conventional fashion. So we did the drilling work, metallurgical work, and we developed normally. But as we were progressing through, COVID hit, and that did impede a lot of development, and it pushed us really back until about 2023 we could get going again. And principally the reason for that is that we had actually sourced a lot of government financing because we were this critical mineral. The government wanted to support us, and they had put us in touch with both state and federal ways to solicit money for the contract. But during the COVID years, those facilities actually shut down. So we were essentially still doing work and development work like mapping and extra drilling and more geophysics. But the loans for those they all cleared in 2023. So immediately we went out and bought a 50-acre industrial site with buildings on it. We pretty much have the monopoly on industrial land in that entire area now, because we were fortunate enough to get that. Comes with after we bought that land, we'd already purchased a big lumps plant. The lumps plant, just to break it down into the different types of fluorspar, typically industry treat it in 2 grades. So met spar is metallurgical grade, and that's for things like steel, cement, glass industries. It's still a major component, and there's a lot of interest in us from domestic steel suppliers for this product. And then there's the acid spar, which is anything that's enriched to 97% plus. And that's principally used in the manufacture of aluminum, hydrofluoric acid, fluorine, lithium-ion batteries. It's 2/3 of the US market. So the first plant we bought in was the metallurgical lumps plant. It was the more basic. And we've actually now commissioned a group that's constructing it. So you can see the presentation, that top picture there, that's our land, and behind it, that's all of our land as well. Behind it, that we might build a tailings dam on it. And just to the right of that, you can't see it, there is a construction site where the lumps plant is being erected at the moment. And as soon as we had done that, we closed a second, much larger financing that was backed by the state of Utah for $10.5 million. And once we closed that financing, we went out immediately and bought the flotation plant that we needed to produce that acid spar, that higher grade material that is 2/3 of the US market. And so we paid for that in full already. And that is now on its way to being delivered to site. And it's being fabricated, and it should be on its way to being delivered to site later in Q2. The ambition here is to try and get that thing online later in Q4. And then we can have big 2 project lines there. Alongside that, we did a lot of renovations on rail spurs, and we have a contract with Union Pacific, where once the product is produced at our industrial site, we can then go on and we can ship that anywhere in the country. Alongside of this, we were able to raise some money to build out the mining side of things. And so we went out and we contracted with a mining contractor that has already been involved in the area and knew the area very well, and actually knew the resource, which is very rare. And we brought Provo Mining in, and already they cleared the whole mine site. They site prepped it. They brought in all the heavy equipment. So we've got the boulder, the loaders, the dozers, the diggers. We've even got the portal construction equipment. So that's all been brought in. That's already ours. We purchased that, and they've already started on the portal construction now. So the plan now for Provo Mining will be to build in a ramp installation that's a sort of a corkscrew shape that from the surface downwards. And then there'll be offshoot adits that will intersect different ore bodies at different heights. And one really great thing that has come out of this development work is that as they were building this, they kept on finding more and more fluorspar. So the resource that we were going to mine became bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's improved the economics substantially as we've gone along. So as we've been building this out, obviously we've attracted increasing amounts of interest from industry. So groups like Honeywell that make a chemical company, and also from steel manufacturers. So the middle picture there is Purcell Earth Contour visiting the mine site, and that's the mine site just behind you where it's all been dug out as the portal's being constructed. And after seeing the site and the buildings and the plants all going up, as well as the mine construction, they've even offered to put $2 million in to assist with launching the mine and commissioning it. So that'll be invaluable as we get going. And they've essentially said we cannot produce enough of this material, because even imports alone is over 600,000 tons a year into the United States. And if you include all the products that are downstream that are included in that, the US needs 2 million plus tons of fluorspar a year. And our mine will be likely producing somewhere in the region of about 50,000 tons. So no matter what we upscale to, they'll take everything we can produce. And even when we get around to producing acid spar, we know that there's a market with Purcell Earth Contour to take that off us already. And so it's a very unique project in the sense that we are very de-risked, and we're very, very close to becoming a mining operation now, and a manufacturing operation we're providing for industry. So I'm just going to go through some of the questions that we've got here that's come up on the slides. But the lifetime of the mine, what was quite interesting about the deposit type of the mine is that they come in very non-contiguous fluorspar pipes. And so it's the way mining is currently constructed is that you have typically vein systems where you drill at one end of the vein and another end, and you extrapolate between them. And we don't have that advantage. But what we have done is we've got a lot of geologists and geophysicists and mining engineers to map all of the pipes, and also look at production records, LiDAR results at volume, and we've extrapolated from that how much ore can be expected across the 150 to 200 pipes that we've identified at surface and slightly below surface. And that still ignores everything deep below, like these new discoveries we've been finding as we've been developing the Lost Sheep mine. But even if you were to half what we had in that estimate and then half it again, it would still arrive you at about a 20-year mine life. There's an enormous amount of fluorspar, and the good part is that most of it is beneath the surface, so nobody's even had a clue it's there, because it's all been artisanally mined. And for the first time ever, the district is consolidated, and we can have big operation going on here where we're removing hundreds of thousands of tons of earth on a yearly basis. So how much does it cost per ton to mine? What was quite interesting about this is we wanted to get an independent engineering firm to assess this, because it's always better to have an external cost come in from an external party, because then you know that the company hasn't manipulated it to make itself seem more interesting. So we contracted this work out to a group called P&E Engineering, and they ran a very comprehensive financial analysis of not just all the OPEX that was involved, but also the mining process, bottlenecks, the plant capacities, the rail capacities, to look at the entire cost of everything, including water, utilities. And their conclusion back in 2021 was really about per ton to produce, it was about $150. What I would say now is that there has been inflation, and there has been increases in labor, steel, those kind of costs. So I would imagine that price has probably crept up by, say, 50, at most maybe $75 per ton, because even though there's material and labor change costs, what we're actually doing here is very basic. Like 50% of what we take out the ground is going to be final product. So the cost per ton is actually very small for something compared to something like gold, which is grams per ton. I mean, we've got 500 kilos per ton versus grams, and so you can get an idea of why cost per ton is quite low. and how much does it sell for? So interestingly, when we did the financial estimates with the P&E Engineering back in 2021, the current price they could evidence for was about $550 a ton. Actually, now what's happened is that, again, because of damaged international supply chains, fewer people being able to source this stuff, including fewer producers, that price has now gone up. So we fortunately have strategic partners also involved in the production of fluorspar, but abroad, who's given us insight into what these things are selling for in the United States. And we can see now that $550 has gone up to $700, $750 a ton. So even if there was an increase in how much per ton costs, what the fluorspar price is appreciated to in those couple of years is much in excess. So we are very, very close now. We're building out the construction of the processing plant at the same time the mine is going, and we're trying to concurrently get them to move at the same time. We could actually accelerate the construction of the plant, but there's actually cost savings that the company can make, and we really want to try and be stewards of the money that we've actually got. It's really at this point, because we're so close, we've got to be as careful as we can. So the ramp installation is going to take probably another 4 months before it hits the ore, and we can start taking that out of the ground. So we've coincided the construction and the production of the processing facility to coincide round about the same kind of time. And so if you build in things that can go wrong, and that seems to be what's happened in the last few years, then even then you're adding on maybe 1 month or 2 months onto what we estimate currently for getting into that production, having that first revenue. That won't be the total production immediately. There will be obviously an optimization and ramp up period for several months. But the important part is that the generated revenue from the company can then pay for that upscaling, that optimization. So just to touch on the global market. So it's been increasing quite rapidly, and actually the reason why it's become more constrained is that the lithium-ion battery market has got very large, and you can't make a lithium-ion battery without fluorspar. It goes into the anode, the cathode, and the electrolyte. But because, say, steel requirements and construction costs and aluminum, those commodities haven't fallen in demand, it's squeezed fluorspar a lot harder. So that explains why the price has spiked and why you see the revenues jump from, say, 2 billion to 4 billion. But most of it is still coming out of Asia, and there's obviously concerns amongst say countries like the US to have that domestic supply, because it doesn't want to be reliant on consumers at the moment either, especially when you consider that 50% of the world's fluorspar is produced by China. Currently in the US as well, they have to source a lot of their material from Mexico and Vietnam. One problem they're having in Mexico is that there's only one big mine, the Las Vegas mine, that's producing fluorspar for the United States. And they're having quality control issues with the grade and the composition. So I mean the impurities that you find in it. And that's why there's sort of companies like the Honeywells and Picel as Contour are approaching us to try and give them a domestic solution for the fact that there is Mexico fluorspar available, still not enough, and they still need to go outside of North America to try and get it. And now that's extended to South America, some from China, and they're even hoping Canada can bring our resources online. But still, if you consider importation duties, the US fluorspar, the domestic supply, is the most advantageous source you could get. So I say that the key blockers to achieving production and mining dates at the moment, we're fortunate that things are actually going very well, maybe the best they've ever gone at the moment, and production and construction is going very nicely. I'd say recent blockers have been, we had a very weird seasons. It'd be nice if global warming was true, because we got snow from like November to February, and that it broke up the construction of the plant a fair amount. But it's now spring, and I think, laying things like concrete and putting in rebar, it's no longer an issue. Hopefully, we won't get cold snaps again that can disrupt the construction of this. And I would say one of the key blockers for the mining side of things would be that even though we sourced these big government financings, so the US Department of Agriculture gave us money, as did the state of Utah, none of that money can be spent outside of the processing facility. So while all costs related to plant, equipment, construction, infrastructure, utilities, all of that's covered, which is very unique for a mining company. We can't utilize those funds for mining. So we can proceed. Everyone's proceeding at the moment on the mine site, and they are fully paid up, and they can go for quite a while. But at some point, there will need to be additional money put into that just to complete that ramp system to get them into ore. So the target dates for mine operation. Legally, we're not supposed to really give those out because it could be considered misleading, but I think it's fair to say now, because we're so close, that we really are months away from actually launching our operation. So it's not going to be next year or the year after that. We're going to see production and operation this year. The portal is already under construction at the mine site. The processing plant, the initial one, is already going up, and the second one will be arriving on site later this year. So the operation is imminent. It's actually very nice, because when we can shift away from being a junior mining company into a manufacturing company, then we have many more resources at our disposal, and we're treated very differently by the market. So who we are a small cap junior mining company currently looking to become a manufacturing company. We're currently trading around about 19-20 cents. We are going to be a small component of what the US needs, but for the customers we do have, a major logistical advantage, as well as de-risking their future supply of their products. And some of these companies don't even care about how much they actually pay for this stuff. They just want that steady supply because it's a small cost component of aluminum or steel or whatever. But the mission of the company is to return the fluorspar manufacturing industry to North America. We've lost it now for almost 30 years. Bringing it back would be a major achievement. It would garner a lot of political and industrial support. And it would enable us then to pivot as the experts in North America and the United States of building out other big deposits in the country, because these deposits do exist. They are likely very profitable, especially given the current market. And we would be in the best position to exploit them, because even when we were building out our facilities, there was no expertise within the United States to help us. It had all basically either shipped overseas, or the people involved have retired. So we can offer a direct purchase of shares for investors. I think there might be one last opportunity. If there is any interest in that, it would be best to write to the company directly, and we'll put you on a list where it's possible. We're probably not going to do any more financing again, though, because once we do hit that ore, it makes better sense to obviously self-sustain and build up using our own revenues, and it would prevent further dilution. It would protect shareholder value, and that way you're also ensuring that that you can expect a more steady share price rise over time. So for tactical reasons, obviously we'll do one more private placement, and that'll be the final one. And if there is interest, obviously reach out to the company directly for that. For the minimum investment you can start with, it actually doesn't matter in the market. If you want to buy in the Canadian market, you can look on the Canadian Securities Exchange, CSE. If you want to buy in the States, the OTCQX, and if you're in Europe, then the Frankfurt Exchange also trades in our stock. And when you buy in the market itself, there's no minimum. It could be $1, it could be $2. It's really up to you. I would say for private placement, typically a minimum amount is maybe $5,000 is what you would do, because there's a lot of associated paperwork and brokerage. Well, our own internal that we need to deal with as part of that investment. We could consider lower, but typically it's just as a rough ballpark. That's usually what the financing and the lawyers will deal with. So, just a little bit about the team as well. My background as Chief Executive Officer, I am a chartered and professional mining engineer, but I do also have experience as a nuclear engineer, where I worked in the construction actually of manufacturing facilities for reactor cores. But my most recent history has all been in mining, where I've worked on building up silver mines, lithium mines, and that was prior to obviously getting involved with ARES and wanting to build out the facilities in Utah and creating what I want to be a national business that has many operating mines across the country. But we have a very technical team. Victoria has about 30 years, I think, as a chief financial officer and auditor and accountant. We have two geologists, Paul Sargent and Raul. Raul was the geologist who worked on the largest fluorspar mine in Spain, and Paul Sargent has a career of about 25 years just exclusively in geology, and he's actually our VP of exploration as well. So the good part here is that he can attach a lot of scrutiny to whatever the mining engineers are doing, and I believe he's even building his own. He's already building several gold projects at the moment, or gold mines in Africa. So that's it. Happy to jump on.
Back to me, Jim. Sorry, Mark.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed, James, for updating investors. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen, which is why James and Carl take a couple of moments to review the questions you submitted already. I'd just like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Carl, if I may, you've received a number of questions from investors ahead of today's event and during the event. So if I may hand back to you just to read out those questions, and I'll pick up from you at the end.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. James, thanks for that. So many questions here, quite a few of them on financing. So the first one is, what is the estimated amount of missing financing gap for completing ramp installation?
So it's actually a very small amount. Like it's if it wasn't for such a bad mining market, it wouldn't even be an issue. But most of the costs are actually already covered. So from where we are now, we can still continue to go for a fair bit of time. But to actually get into the ore itself, it's probably we're going to need to raise another further $3 million, and it's very likely the private placement will form a major component of that when we do it. To complete the full ramp installation would be about 5, but to get us into ore, where we're revenue generating cash, it's really only about 3 million from now. So in terms of what you look at for a typical mining operation, you need tens of millions. It's really got down to the wire now on how small we actually need. And the good part is, even if we do struggle with this, the advantage here is that the company does have the ability to exercise options, or management can exercise those options to provide that missing capital. But yeah, that $3 million is what we need to hit, I think, for keeping the engineers going. We just need to structure that financing in the most prudent way possible, so it's the most advantageous for the company structure.
So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think it's still good if we cover it. So the question reads, will additional financing be needed after the mining completion for financing operations deficits while production ramps up?
The fortunate part here is that it doesn't look like we'll need additional funds outside of what the mine will initially produce. The margin on the product is sufficient enough that already it gives us that capital that we actually need. And the benefit here is that there actually is money already from the government financings that will be there and is still in existence even when we're in production. The difficulty with those finances that I mentioned is that they can't be used on the mine. So while there's actually money coming out of the mine itself, there still will be additional capital already in our bank from those financings we've got from the from the state and from the federal government. So no, we don't need any further financing after that.
Thanks. And do you have any updates on the current construction at the mine site and the production facility?
Oh, I mean, at the mine site, I've tried to get as many pictures out recently as possible about what they're doing. And I think the most recent update concerned the portal. So after they cleared the mine site and they drill and blasted the area, and they swept it clean and brought in the heavy equipment, the portal construction started, and then the shotcreting happened with all the bolts. And as they're drilling into the hard rock now, obviously they're making good progress on there. It's sort of funny, but one funny thing that happened was that as they were building up that face, that portal for the ramp installation, they hit a big chunk of floor spar. And so we had to have a conversation about how we actually modify the ramp installation so we can drill it away where we can intersect it at depth later. But it gives you an idea of how much is actually at present at site when we put that portal face in and immediately hit a big chunk of floor spar. And on the processing side of things, concrete foundations were finally done after the weird winter that became winter and that intruded into spring. And obviously the rebar of all that have gone down. And I actually got a picture from the site today where they were moving some of the plant equipment into space, like the hoppers and things like that. So it's beginning to look like a proper operation. The good part is that the plant itself, all the assembly of the components is done. So as the steel's being erected now, it's essentially going to be almost like a Lego system where you just slot in the assembled parts as we go. And the good thing here is that because we had to source this plant from groups that were already in the fluorspar industry abroad, is that we've actually got some of them arriving on site later this month to help with the installation and optimization of the plant itself. So we can make sure that when it actually commissions, we hit the ground running and we can be producing.
Thanks, James. And our next question is the purple pit still the primary target for the ramp, and when do you anticipate reaching it?
So the good part about this story is that the purple pit was the anticipated initial target, combined with the giant little pit just next to it, which is slightly smaller. But when we started going deeper, as in we doing delineation drilling to find out where we should put the ramp, we actually hit a connecting ore body. So the purple pit has suddenly become a much larger pit that's connected to 2 or 3 other pipes, including the giant little pit. So it was our initial target combined with another one, but now actually, because they're one big mass, that allows for our ability to mine that as one big bulk. And so it simplifies a lot of the added offshoots and all that sort of thing. So the purple pit, yes and no, but like it's better than we anticipated because of that drilling. But nobody's ever gone that deep. And the reason we had to go that deep is because we had to ensure that the fluorspar ran out at a certain depth for the mine planning. Carl, what was the second part of that question?
Sorry, it deleted itself as I asked it.
It's all right. I'll probably cover it somewhere else.
Okay, very good. Our next question, more about the mines. It says ARES purchased large, heavy industrial equipment for mining. What equipment was actually purchased, and is it on site?
So the pictures that you've seen, like the dozers, the loaders, the excavators, the cranes, the trucks, we all own that. That's all on site at the moment. So the pictures are representative of what we've got. It's kind of funny because normally, actually, to conserve cash, you would lease initially, and then once in production, you buy. But actually, the way the financing is constructed is that there's enough money just to go and buy it. But the people who gave us those finances actually want us to buy so we can create capital assets. So it's very beneficial. We now have more capital assets to our name, which makes the company much more intrinsically valuable, and we can utilize those as we want. But no, they're all on site at the moment. Principally, everything's at the mine site. Currently, there are a couple of things. I think there are a couple of loaders that we did use at the processing site just to move earth. But everything's really at the mine site where the big operations is going on.
Thanks. Has any of the flotation plant equipment arrived at the production plant site? And if so, has any of it been installed?
So none of the flotation plant is delivered yet. We only purchased that in January, so it takes a bit of time to complete the design work, fabricate it, ship it, and for it to arrive. The good part is that a lot of that is done. But the metallurgical lumps plant, that's entirely done. So that's all delivered to site. That's all there at the moment. So if you were to visit it, you would see the big equipment that's there. And that's the one we can obviously get going with on that initial revenue initially and straight away.
Similar question, this one about the flotation plant equipment arrived at the production plant site. If so, has any of it been installed?
That's the same question.
It's the same question?
Yeah, that's the same question.
Well, then we have come to the end of our questions, unless anybody else has time to type one in.
You've addressed all the questions that were submitted from investors. So thank you once again to everybody for their engagement. James, if any further questions do make themselves available, we'll obviously send those through to you, and you can add a response there if it's appropriate to do so. I know investor feedback will be important to you, James, and I'll shortly redirect those on the call to give you their thoughts and expectations. But before doing so, I wondered if I may just come back to you for a couple of closing comments, after which I'll send investors for their feedback.
I think the important thing to note about the company, why it's actually interesting, is that a lot of people can be interested in junior mining companies because there's a lot of potential upside when you're buying penny stocks and things like that. But we're very different beasts now in comparison to almost everybody else in the market. Everything's very de-risked. There's a lot of money that's been put into the project. We're very heavily backed by the government. And the good thing is the heavy lifting's been done. The plants have been purchased, they're under construction, the mining permits are all done, they've all been signed off, MSHA signed off on the mine plan, we're building the portal right now. We really are months away from it. I think that if there's any take-home message, it's that really, that we are junior mining, but very shortly not going to be, and we're getting closer all the time. So there's construction and mining work going on every single day to get us there. And if we can push it along any faster, we will. So.
That's great. James, Carl, thank you once again for updating investors this evening, or this morning, where you're from. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you please not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity for you to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of ARES Strategic Mining, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation.